Hello and welcome into, I just realized we don't have a name for this show. Rebroadcast or translation of Maxime Hagenbourger's interview. Oh, and Erwan's, sorry. Maxime and Erwan's interview with Sorare CEO Nicolas Julia, which happened a few hours ago. And Maxime has been just exploding onto his keyboard, trying to get it all translated and transcribed and whatnot. Thank you to everybody who has joined us. Clement was first. I think he was excited, more excited than anyone else. And there are already jokes that people are looking forward to my translation of this, which didn't come.
No, but yeah, so we thought about a lot of formats for this. Obviously, at the beginning, I thought I was going to do like a live translation, but when I saw that he was going to talk like for 3 minutes on a single subject, I was like, no, definitely not going to happen. So what I did is I tried to do an AI transcript of the interview. That didn't work well. So I spent the last 30 minutes re-listening to the interview and did a sum up. And obviously, that's going to be way better than the interview, because you'll get the message and you'll get also our reaction live on the message. So that's going to be better. And obviously, you can rewatch the interview on our Twitch channel. We're probably going to publish it on our YouTube channel. And I think like maybe we'll find some, I don't know, some crazy and very nice person to do the subtitles for the video. I don't know if you'll find that, but anyway, you're not going to miss anything.
Yeah, I think that was obviously there is a large English speaking Sorare community that's very interested in what Nicola has to say. And I think that this discussion, I don't think was billed as the same as the one that Dan and Alok did with John Nellis last week. Obviously, there's some crossover topics. Looking at your translation of the discussion, there were a few things that you guys touched on that they did not, and kind of vice versa. So for anyone, like, I would recommend going and listening to that. It's always really nice to hear from people directly at Sorare. And if you speak French, you won't find anyone higher up the chain than Nicola from earlier today. But before we get into like what you guys actually discussed, was there anything that you felt he left out, or was it more that like, how did that work?
No, so so we have to be totally transparent on how it happened, and obviously how we did it. So obviously, since the market is not going that well, there are several people, I think that the whole sentiment was they needed to address what was going on in the ecosystem right now, and so they decided to go on certain shows. So Arthur Sosuro did a French podcast. I'm not sure it's live yet. I don't know, but I know that Nellis obviously released the Sorare so far, sponsored by SorareData podcast with Alok and Dan, which was very interesting. And obviously we were in touch with the Sorare team so we can get Nicolas on board, and so we did. That's the second time in 5 months, so we are very happy about that. And I don't know how real interviews work, but this one was pretty smooth because we sent a list of questions because we felt that he needed to prepare for some, because like basically, like if you don't come prepared, if you're the CEO of a company as large as Sorare, you don't necessarily have all the info. And so we sent a list of questions, and that's pretty much it. So he knew which subjects were going to be talked about. But what's crazy with that guy, and I admire him for that, is that he took chat questions pretty much all the time. At one point, he like stopped answering to us, and it was like, no, I'm taking this question from the chat. And that was very interesting. And at the end, he did like 5 or 6 questions from the chat directly. So that's why I love those formats. It's because like there's interactivity, and I feel like the next interviews from the English-speaking person from Sorare need to happen live because it brings way more than just like a prepared interview or prepared podcast, in my opinion. So that's why I'm very grateful for Nicolas to actually accept that exercise, because it's not if you're not familiar with Twitch, you're not familiar with live streams, it can be intimidating, but like he did it very well.
Yeah, I actually commented that I was surprised when they said that they were going to have that Sorare said they were going to have some people from Sorare on like community podcasts, and I thought it was strange that they wouldn't just have one of their own. But the benefit of going to people who are in the community is that they come with questions and topics that they may not think of, that are maybe the people at Sorare don't think are as important, and whoever they're talking to does. And so that's great to hear that Nicola was so open with the questions that came in that theoretically he wasn't prepared for, or a prize for.
He's somewhat prepared, but I mean,
Sure.
That also is very interesting for them, in my opinion, because they get direct reactions to what they say, and they get a feeling of what's the interest of the community right now. And also, obviously, you have Twitter, you have Discord and stuff like that, but like Twitch is a kind of different space for opinions and stuff like that. And since there's a moderation, well, you have to state your opinion pretty friendly and not doing this like by insulting people. So that's kind of a safe space. So that's very also interesting.
Yeah, for sure. Do you want to jump in?
Yeah, sure.
Because you guys didn't start with a light one. There wasn't no softball questions to start.
That was my intent all the time. Well, when I prepared the interview, I was like, I'm going to start with this one because to me it's the most important question so far. From the interview, I think it's the most important question because like, so for context, for not French people, let's say, so the Sorare had a deal with the gambling authority in France in place that was going to expire, last Friday. So it expired last Friday, and obviously there was like some concern about what's going to happen after the deal expires. And on Thursday, casually, a press article said that the French government was working on a law to actually regulate companies like Sorare. So basically ending all speculation about what's going to happen next. What's going to happen next is probably a law is going to be voted by the French National Assembly, so the lawmakers. And it's going to be, well, the article says that the national gambling operator in France is pretty pissed at it. So it has to be a good deal for Sorare. And so that was the first question we asked to Nicolas was, so his understanding of the situation and what he was thinking about that. And so he recognized that there was a very urgent situation with French regulation because it was like kind of like more restricted than other countries. He cited Switzerland as another example of having like a very tight regulation. It's important to note that Sorare is blocked in Switzerland for like 2 years now. And so there was an urgent situation to be dealt with, and he's happy that a balanced law project on the matter is going to be voted on and done by a government that is supporting the ecosystem. So he was pretty happy. So when someone is telling you that it's balanced, that means it's favorable to you, right? You're not
Right.
saying it's balanced if it's not favorable to you. So yeah, he was pretty happy with that. And the follow-up question I asked him is, does he plan on a domino effect? That means that if France is going to regulate Sorare that way, our other countries are going to do as well. And what he said is that he's hoping also for unified laws. He thinks that it's a possibility that other countries follow France's steps towards regulation. But he wasn't like commenting too much on that. He said that he's willing to he's liking the possibility of this happening, but he's still waiting to see what's going to happen. But he emphasized on the fact that other countries are not in the same situation than France. Like France was a very like urgent situation to be dealt with, and the situation is not the same in other countries. So he was like, I want to reassure the community that there's no like urgent situation to be dealt with anymore.
I don't know if that many people know about the Switzerland situation. Is that like a full block?
Yeah, it's
Like
a full
you
ban.
can't
Yeah.
buy the cards either, right?
So you can't access the website.
Right.
So if you access it through a VPN, you can do that. So there's no ban on the on the citizens, on the Swiss citizens, like buying Sorare cards, but they don't allow access to Sorare from Switzerland's internet.
Right. Right.
And that's pretty big, but it happened like in a small market. Obviously, for Sorare, Sorare doesn't own like any kind of licensing agreements with the Swiss Pro League, and that was like, I don't know, 2 years ago. So like no one cared at that time.
Right. So because I know there are people out there that are hearing this for the first time, but it's
Yeah,
also been the case for about 2 years. So it's not
yeah.
like
So no one cares. No one cares.
right.
In Switzerland, so no one cares.
Right. Just
And I
proof
mean,
that
it doesn't like block Swiss money Swiss money from Sorare, because if you want to actually play Sorare, you can just use a VPN. So that's a sign, though, that some regulators are not happy with the current model and the current situation. But hopefully, like, what's going to do France? And I want to say that I was one of the many people in the Web3 ecosystem in France saying that France is going to mess things up with by being like over-regulated over like Web3 companies and stuff like that. And I have to say they did a pretty good job, because now a lot of Web3 companies are going to settle in France, like Circle, Coinbase, and other companies, great companies, to be honest. We thought they were going to go to the UK or stuff like that, and they went to France. And so that also means that there's no going back, to me, for the French government if you allow those companies to come to France, to settle in France, to create jobs in France. You have to have like a nice legal framework around those companies. So I'm pretty confident that once that law is voted, that's going to be pretty amazing for the Web3 ecosystem in France.
it did seem like there was more of a push to create new regulations based on Web3 companies than trying to make them fit into like current
Yeah.
gambling laws or whatever it is. So
And so that's a great transition, because that's the next question. It's the question was, anything going to change because of that regulation? And so he was talking about two things. One thing is, how do you deal with addiction risk and stuff like that? And what he was saying is that it's Sorare is probably more risky than like traditional video games like Fortnite or stuff like that. But it's probably less risky in terms of like addiction than sports gambling. He was specifically mentioning sports gambling as having like, social mechanisms that make you want to bet more, and mechanisms in products, in gambling products, that make you want to bet more. And so that's something that he agrees on, like having to take action to actually make sure that they protect players. But he also said that the regulation has to be very balanced, because one thing that he said their position was like very firm on is that the current product should not be affected by the regulation. And he said that they should not be in a position where they would be like forced to go in a certain position because of existing laws, but they had to be laws that were like, adapting to the situation, to the product. And he very much mentioned that he doesn't want the community like to be disrespected, or the product has to change because of regulation. And that was very interesting to hear him say that, because he was basically saying, I'm willing to give up on some stuff, but the core product, I'm not giving anything. Like, you have to do the job to make sure that we create value, and that our community feels okay with the regulation, and that we don't have to change much. So that was pretty interesting.
yeah, for sure. Because I think that ultimately the biggest concern for many people is just where regulators decide where Sorare fits, and Sorare's response feels like it's always been whatever whatever the options are that you think we fit, we don't, and so you have to make another one. And it does seem like that, at least in the French regulators, are closer to being on board with that. Of you're right, we need a new category, and that's where you'll fit. And Sorare always seemed open to regulation through that extra category, but not being regulated as something that they don't think they are. So.
But it's fair because they created the category, right? But for those not in France, you have to understand that they have like probably the best government possible to actually allow these kind of rules and this kind of law. We have a very like company focused government that is very happy to help entrepreneurs and innovation. And so there's probably 4 more years of that government, so that's pretty much the right context to be in and the right government to be working with. And they did a pretty good job by doing that, by working with the government and making sure that the regulators actually understand their situation and what was going on.
Yeah.
So that was the regulation subject. So we started pretty hard, but to me, it's like it's the only it's one kind of like a black swan scenario where the regulators could come in and say, "Hey guys, so we are going to stop the party, and you're going to have to adapt to certain things." And so this press article was very big to me and very important for what's going to happen next. So first question that we had, and so we went in a more like strategy aspect of the interview was, so we hear a lot about like, you know, Mbappe being an investor, Zidane being an ambassador, and Messi being an ambassador, like Serena Williams being like board advisor. I think that's the right title. And so we didn't see much activation with those. And that was our question, like, what are you expecting from those ambassadors, and why aren't we seeing like much from those? And so what he says is that I wasn't expecting that, to be fairly honest. And he said basically that the product has to be ready. If you want to do marketing operation with those ambassadors, you have to be ready for what's coming next. And he just said that the product wasn't ready for marketing operations for to go alongside like the product. And so he says that first they bring a lot of credibility to the project and to people they deal with and the user base, so that's a good thing. But they also help behind the scene. He told us that Serena Williams was actually with him during MLB and NBA negotiations, and that's I think the first time I'm hearing that. And he also said that PK is helping a lot with the football product. And so they are helping basically behind the scenes and also in terms of credibility. But they want to do marketing operations with these athletes, but he feels that you have to be ready for what's going to happen next. If you put like Mbappe or Messi in a TV commercial for Sorare, you're going to have a massive amount of players like coming. And he feels like the product is too complex, and we will talk about his views on the product right now after that, but there are too many blockers right now. And so he said, for example, like, do people think that depositing money on Sorare is actually safe because of the FTX incident and the whole market crypto bubble and stuff like that? So it's not that simple to him. But what he said also is that Zidane actually spent some of his Saturday with Global Cup winners this weekend, and so they are going to do some marketing operations based on that experience over the coming weeks. So expect some Zidane and Sorare content. And he was like, he said like the emotional aspect of such an experience is amazing, and he wants to obviously like promote that way further and allow people like Sorare managers to feel those experiences in the future. And to me, I'm like, those, I'm not going to say any bad word here, but those guys are very lucky. Those guys, like, they played football with Zidane. I mean, even if Zidane is like crushing me, I'm like, I want to pressure him, like, hey, am I getting the ball from Zidane? So that, I mean, to me, that's amazing.
Yeah,
So,
I think we do touch on that. Things like that. It's not like not everybody wants that, but there are a lot of people who do. And just at some point we need to move away from just card and ETH prizes, and like being able to, like, that's not an experience that you can just like go out and buy. And so it's just not, I think people just underestimate how important those things are as being as something that could be part of the game.
Yeah. And Jenny says that I have the Zidane haircut, and that's right. But also Zidane has the Maxime haircut. So I mean, who has what? I mean, I'm asking you. No, but yeah, I mean, that's crazy. I mean, to me, it's completely crazy. But anyway, so moving forward was the question about, like, he talked about like a lack of fiat in the previous answer. And so I followed up on that and said, like, what's missing for a fiat wallet? They communicated on that earlier this month, or like 2 weeks ago or something.
Yeah.
Like, where they announced that they would stop credit card buys on the secondary market. And so he said, let me take an internal document to explain you, like an internal presentation to talk to you about that. And so he made 5 points. So the first point that they want, so first, what's missing is that they want like people to understand what's the difference between Sorare and other products. And I completely agree with him. It's like what's missing from Sorare today is like, how can they effectively show that this game is way different than any kind of game that you played already. So that's something that obviously they don't do very well today, and they want to do a bit differently and a bit better. So also making, as the second point was making the crypto mess. He actually said bordel in French, which means mess, but like it's a rude word in in French, and said make it simple, basically. The third point he made was product is too complex today. He said that they needed to kill some features, didn't specify which, but he said that they were displaying too much info right now. So I don't know what are the specifics, but he said they were going to kill some features in the coming months and weeks. Economy stability, that's their number one priority, he said, over revenue. That's one of the main points of the interview. He said economy stability, that's the overall priority, and over revenue. And so how can they use the leverages that they have to actually improve the economy stability? So he mentioned burning cards. That's a topic we discussed pretty like 1 week ago, like last week, and I think 2 weeks ago. So that's a conversation that we keep getting. And he was talking about a lot of other things, but didn't specify really what. But we'll talk about it a bit further when he talks about prices. And fifth point was social mechanisms. So how do you make sure that you bring players to the platform organically? And that's what he said, is that great Web2 products actually had mechanisms inside their products that made like people come organically, and that's what made them successful. Sorry. So pretty interesting to see what's going to happen on that subject. But like again, it's pretty high level, not going into much of specific features that they are going to add to the platform.
I think there's just some appreciation, at least from those listening, that like economic stability is something that they want. Like obviously they want it, but it's nice to hear them kind of recognize that that's something that's important for the whole ecosystem.
But again, we'll talk about that when we come to that market drop question. But yeah, you can't like just magically make prices go up unless you buy the cards, right? Like, I mean, they could say we buy the cards, but I mean, wouldn't be a great idea, right?
No.
So next question was about like what's the target now? What's the audience that you're targeting? What's the user that you want? They said that obviously they want like big users like Pranksy and stuff like that. And he mentions that in another question that they have a squad dedicated to those players. But like he agrees that mainstream audience is not going to happen now, and before that you have to get to other user segments before going to this. So he was pretty like vague on the question, but like he said that they're going to need to do this step by step. Like they started with the crypto community, the NFT community, the sports hardcore fans community. So they have to see which other segments they have to address first. And he said something that's pretty interesting to me. Those little sentences that seem like nothing, but he said, for competition reasons, I'm not going to elaborate further. So he said that he was not going to do something because of competition, and never heard him say. He never said it to me like that. Like never. I never heard him like publicly say, "I'm not giving it too much right now because I think like competition could use that."
I'm curious who he thinks that competition.
Yeah, I mean, I was like, wow. So,
yeah, I mean,
me,
they've always said they want like millions of users, and there was never like a point where we're like, we want millions of users to try to buy Mbappe rare cards. Like it's not something like that. And so the bigger the platform gets, just in terms of our cards or sports and whatnot, like obviously the number of users will be coming. But yeah, that is kind of interesting that he would say something like that. Yeah.
Maybe he knows something that we don't.
Right.
Probably.
I'm sure he knows lots that we don't.
So other very interesting questions about licensing and the fact that they probably spent a lot of money on licenses. And so the question was, how is the company going in terms of like finances? And so what he said is like anything an entrepreneur that has a lot of money during the bull market would say is that basically they took the cash while the cash was available. So they took it so they could prepare for tougher times, and tougher times are now, basically. He said that they acquired licenses in a very competitive market, and that's satisfaction. And he said that if they like, you have to take those opportunities when they present themselves, right? Because those licensing deals like last for 6-7 years, he said. And if you don't get them when you can, you're probably never going to get them back. So that's basically what he said. And he said that it was very, very easy to, well, not very easy, but like much easier to actually like extend the licensing contract, than to get one if there is a deal in place. So that's what he said. And he compared to EA being dominating the FIFA game market against Konami with PES. And he said that they had, like, PES at some point in time had a better game than FIFA, but they didn't have the licenses, and EA Sports like just kept getting the licenses, and that's why they dominated so much. He talked also about like the market like situation, but like the economical market situation with Meta, Amazon, and other tech companies cutting jobs. And he said that he was working with his partners to actually reduce the size of deals, like making sure that they adapt to that market situation also. And he mentioned something very interesting. He said like some people on social media or in the press are leaking numbers that are actually not true, or very far from the reality. And he said he's not going to like be involved. He said, I'm not getting into this. But he kind of mentioned, and it feels like somehow it got to him at some point in time. I think that like like some people being very aggressive on social media and stuff like that, like at some point I feel like it got to him. And he says something further in the interview that is also very interesting on that subject.
Yeah, I just want to go quickly back about the whole when they raised money and then when they spent money to get these licenses. I think most people have never been in that situation of like running a company and trying to raise money. And when there are investors who are willing to give you tens or hundreds of millions of dollars, it's usually bad to say no, especially when you're a young company. Obviously, terms can make it bad, but generally you try to raise money when money is available, because when money is not available, you want to be able to have it. And that's exactly kind of what they did. But also with these licenses, they were probably negotiated at a time when everybody had money. And so they, the numbers themselves get big. And generally, if you're the one being paid, you want those numbers to stay the same. And then if you're paying it, you want it to go down if economic times are different. And so I think it's one of those business aspects that, like, we all think about, but we don't think about it nearly deep enough to appreciate like what happens. And like everybody also looks at the valuation that Sorare were valued at and think that's how much money they have. And it's like you don't get, I think, what was it, 4.67 billion? Like they don't have 4.7 billion in cash. That was just the valuation for the cash they raised. And so I just think that there are like legitimate business aspects that a lot of people don't understand. And so it's easy for them to start throwing these numbers out and say, well, they have all this money, they should just get every license and let's just go. And it just doesn't work that way.
But imagine being like a football club, like signed a deal with Sorare in 2020, for example, and like see that Sorare became so successful, and you're like,
Yes.
I want a piece of the cake also, and why are you paying me so low, right? So, I mean, it has to be a very difficult negotiation sometime with like previous partners, and we will talk about the J-League at the end of the interview, but yeah, I mean, it's not that easy. You can't just sign a check and say, hey, we're going to give you that much
Right.
and plus X% on what's going to go above that, and say, I'm going to lose money on that and I'm happy with it. So no, you can't do that. But also in terms of like, if you're like the NBA, for example, or the MLB, your budget line for NFT products before was probably zero, right? And if you get like X today, maybe you want to get X divided by 3 or 4 or 5, as long as it's still superior to 0, right? So, I mean, it's where do you find the balance, right? So that has to be very interesting to do that and to be in those negotiations, but also very like you have to be under a lot of pressure, because
For
like,
sure. I mean, and we
it's not
also
that
just
simple.
can't underestimate the value of getting the licenses to start. Like you said, it's much easier to renegotiate or to extend an agreement than it is to start a new one. There's a lot of stuff that goes into negotiating and signing initial contracts. So the fact that they have a lot of these licenses now, I mean, obviously we know that they're not guaranteed forever and they can go away, but just being able to have a lot of these licenses in place. And so when they are coming up for expiration, that it's easier to extend than it is to start over.
So Numero 10 in the chat says that he did say something about having a long-term contract of about 6-7 years with MLB NBA. So he didn't actually say that. He said, so I was mentioning the 6 and 7 years just before. He said usually those contracts last for 6 or 7 years. But he didn't say that specifically MLB and NBA.
Yeah.
So I listened to the interview like twice or 3 times. So, but that's just correcting on that. He did not specifically say that the contracts they had with MLB and NBA was like 6 or 7 years, but he mentioned that was the overall like normal like agreement duration. So yeah. So just a quick question on, do they still hire people? They say they do. They say they love hiring old players because they have that passion that is very interesting to them. He says that if you want to work with Sorare, reach out to the right person and say concretely where you can help. And Erwan kind of tried to get himself like hired by Sorare. That was pretty weird. No, just kidding. But he asked the question, so I said like, Erwan, what are you doing right now?
Yeah.
So that was pretty fun. And he said that some employees cannot play the game, and they see great effects coming from that. So,
Yeah,
Mike,
I'm pretty
yeah,
sure
go ahead.
that I know that they can play the free game at least. I don't know if they're playing.
Yeah, everyone can play the free game, but some can now like
Oh, okay.
play with like real NFTs. So, Mike says something very interesting. So, if you don't like know our Twitch channel and the French community, so there was like, so Twitch says that there was during the stream like 1.1k unique viewers. So, like at some point in time, we were like 600 concurrents at the peak. And so you have like a variety of managers. You have like the mad managers that like have come to the platform like in 2022. They're like, I'm losing a lot of money. I'm pissed. You have like OGs. You have like people involved in NBA and MLB and stuff like that. So you had way different profile of manager, and that was pretty interesting. But the one thing I said to them at the end is that they behaved great. Like I really thought that this could like get pretty bad if some people like just like got their pitchforks out and just said like give me my money back. But no, it was very interesting and very like enjoyable. um so he at that point took a question from the chat, like specifically he said it's kind of like me during office hours when I say no, I want to answer that question. And he said, so the question I don't really remember, and I don't have like the detail of the questions, but basically is like, why did you allow the prices to actually fall, right? And he said that it's not true, that they obviously made mistakes and they're going to keep making mistakes, as every company does. But he specifically said that they were never issuing more cards on auction to make the prices drop intentionally, and that he agrees that there are some factors under their control that like encourage that drop, but other are definitely not in their control. And he says that he has too much gratitude and gratefulness for the community to do such thing, and that's something he said along the interview. Like we respect the community too much to actually, we don't want to do that. And he develops a bit further in the question that we asked him. We talked about the onboarding just a little bit, like his take on it, and he said that they're very happy with the way that people get attached to cards they own, and so they want to bring the ability to win limited cards maybe earlier in the onboarding process than today. And also he mentioned again like that in the onboarding they don't do a good job at like mentioning what the differences are and show maybe players what the differences are between Sorare and other games. And he said that these subjects are in like constant iteration. They're constantly testing stuff like A/B testing new features and different types of onboarding. So then the question is, so let me just like see like what Ben is saying in the chat. I don't think that's true. The amount of cards issued didn't change significantly, but the type of card changed. They increased the amount of goalkeepers issued significantly. Yeah, I don't have data on that, but maybe. But what he said is that they reduced the number of auctions, and I think that's true. I think that's anyway. No, anyone can probably verify that information. But like recently, like in the last month or so, they reduced the number of auctions. But maybe what Ben is saying is true, but we would have to check out the numbers.
Yeah, I think it's important though that because there were lots of people who thought that they were intentionally flooding the market to reduce prices, and so it's nice to hear somebody, specifically Nicolas, saying that wasn't the case.
Yeah, Chani says that I assume that they had to increase goalkeeper auctions due to all the new game modes. It makes a lot of sense in my opinion. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, maybe they did, maybe they didn't. I don't know. Would it make sense? Maybe. I didn't think about the situation that much. So, I mean, basically what he says is that they didn't like, maybe like they didn't stop issuing, or they didn't like reduce the number of auctions as they should have, but he doesn't like what he says is basically that they didn't intentionally say keep that auction rhythm going because it's going to make the prices drop and that's good for us. So basically that's what he's saying. And so the question about the market state and obviously the prices dropping. And so basically he said that's not my style to actually come here and talk about excuses. But he starts by mentioning that Sorare is resisting way better than most NFT projects and crypto projects. But he says that's no excuse. He says that we shouldn't rejoice that much when it also goes up. I mean, we have to do a better job, like to make sure that it's stable enough. And so he says that obviously current supply increases come from the market with new actions, but also mainly from rewards. And I think we have to do something like that's me talking. I think we have to gather as much data as we can on that because I think it's very important to understand the situation to see how many rewards are issued every month and how many like auctions are or even weekly. I think I'll do that for the next office hours because I think it would help a lot of people like actually understanding what's going on. And he said we have to do a better job to pilot our game economy, bring way more features to play on it and to actually have some leverages. Like he told us about giving incentives to actually hold cards to not sell them. And he mentioned again burning some cards and why not to get something else based on the cards that you burn. And again, he said we need to pilot our economy better. And he says our community and existing players are the most important things to us, and we don't want people to feel that we disrespect them. And he says that their revenue is affected by the drop also, so they have basically no interest in like a drop, like having a revenue drop by like intentionally making the prices drop. So he reminds everyone that, and he says that on other way to possibly monetize stuff on Sorare, he said that secondary market fees on football are coming, and they work on other possible ways to monetize. Then the other question was, or maybe you want to say something about that. I mean, that was pretty. I don't know.
So it seems like every time somebody from Sorare is on something or they talk publicly, they say how secondary market fees are coming to the football product. And it feels like every response to that is like, now is not the time. The market's not doing well. And everybody tries to guess how much it is. Do you ever think that there's a time where they introduce secondary market fees and everyone's like, okay, this feels good now?
Maybe not. Okay, it feels good now, but probably say like announce something good and announce something bad, and the bad thing would be secondary market fees for football. So to me, that's the only thing that they need to do is like, how can you announce something at the same time that is like balancing the bad news that would be like a 5% secondary market fees, or I don't know. I think they would use like the 5%. I don't see why they would use a lower or a higher number than NBA or MLB. Maybe I'm wrong. I mean, that wouldn't make sense to me. But let's see how it goes.
I was going to make a joke about that, how the scarcity numbers are different, and so that's one thing that shouldn't have been different and is. So who knows?
Yeah, I mean, that kind of makes sense.
Yeah, that's a me.
MLB.
I'm the one who's more bothered by that than anyone else. So don't worry. Anyway.
So the next question was like some kind of like evaluation of where MLB and NBA are right now. And he said that it was very encouraging to see like in terms of engagement and retention, like they were almost at football levels. And he said that they want to do marketing in the US also and bring way more users. But to begin with, they wanted to have like solid foundations and with their product, and they felt like they had solid foundations now. So he also reminded us that the blockers that apply to football, like crypto and stuff like that, also apply to NBA and MLB. So we have to also solve those first. So I feel like they're basically saying we are not doing that many market operations because because it's not ready for like mainstream marketing operations, and I feel that makes sense.
Completely agree. I don't think enough people appreciate that the product doesn't feel ready for millions of users.
Yeah, and I mean exactly, because when you get the opportunity to actually have like Mbappe or I don't know who going on a commercial and say, hey, go to Sorare and sign up and stuff like that, you're not getting that opportunity twice, right? It's the same thing than licensing deals. Like
Yeah.
you're not going to see that opportunity again if you mess things up, right? So yeah, I mean, they have to be pretty cautious about that, and I feel like it's a good point to make, and good thing to remind people that it's not because Mbappe is on your cap table that you have to use Mbappe every time you want to use it.
Yep. Yep.
So thanks, Mike, for reminding people to hit the like button, and thank you for those doing that. It's much appreciated. So he talked about, like, we asked him about the mistakes that he thought they made as a company.
It's a great question.
Yeah, I mean,
No, I mean, it's worth
Erwan
asking.
wrote the question, so I mean,
Yeah.
it's obviously good, right? So he said that basically, like, they didn't find the right rhythm. He said we went too fast, then we went too slow, and we went too fast. And he said, like, so I'm going to like read behind the lines for you guys and basically say that they didn't find the right guy at the CEO positions, and that's why like they messed up at some point in time, because he says we lost our DNA at some point, being as processed as a Nasdaq company. So he said, like, basically, no, that's not the right way to do that, and so that's why they were too slow. And then he said, you fight back and see that there are other ways to actually go and not being as processed as a Nasdaq company. Um, and so he said we decided to go another way, and then we did things so too fast, and it's probably also not good to do them too fast, because he mentioned like some rule changes being like not good, because like some players were building squads based on current rules, and like all their scouting was like messed up because they announced rule changes, right? So that's, I mean, that's a good point to make, and that was interesting that he brought that point on himself. And also he says that they tried to improve communication recently, like for like events like those, obviously, and they're trying to say as much as they can. And he said that his legal department is always complaining that he says more than he should.
As he says that 40 minutes into an interview.
And I told him, like, who's paying? Who's paying their salary, Nicolas? And he said, like he chuckled, but he wasn't like comfortable by saying, "Yeah, I pay their paycheck." So
That's it reminds me when we're on office hours, and I don't know if things I can talk about, and then you bring them up, and it's all right. And we don't have a legal department to tell you to
we
settle
don't.
down. I think that whole discussion is really good, and we just have to remember that there really isn't a company like Sorare, and so it's not easy for them. If something happens or they want to make a change, they can't look at another company and say, well, they did this and this was the outcome. Like, this is all very new. So and you don't know that you're moving too fast or you're moving too slow until it's already happened. And so as users, we're growing with Sorare as a company just as much as they are as employees. And so not everything is going to be perfect. And it's nice to see that they're recognizing that what they've done previously didn't work for whatever reasons. And so they'll learn from that, which is great.
Yeah, and again, I feel like it's very important to remind people that there's no textbook for what they're doing,
Right.
and it's basically like there's no textbook that says if you do that, that will change your market this way and stuff like that. And so they are living. It's a live experiment basically, and we're all part of it, and that's what Sorare is. And they are the regulators of that live experiment, and that's not easy to do it when you never did that before. So
Right.
I mean, everyone is learning. you just have to be like the problem is when money is involved in those kind of things, well, things can get heated very fast because some people are losing money. That's a fact. And so yeah, that's why I should remind people that you shouldn't put any kind of money that you're not willing to lose on Sorare, and that's very important to remind people of that, because if you do, you can bitterly regret that afterwards. So someone in the chat, that's something we didn't actually plan, said, all right, for negatives, but we want to also know about the satisfactions, right? And so we asked him that, and he said that he felt that recently they were going back to an encouraging rhythm, and that the sense and back to the values that they had at the beginning, and all of this during a tough market situation, and he feels kind of reassured by that. He said that retention and engagement rates are also very encouraging. He compared them to Netflix's rates. He said his main focus obviously is not on like what's satisfying, but also what are the challenges that they have to tackle. And he said that they want to become the biggest sport brand, and so that the journey is going to be very exciting. We scaled back a bit, I have to say, Andrew, because at some point in time they said the biggest entertainment brand, and now they're scaling back to those base sport brands, and I feel that's good. I mean, start slow. Already the biggest sport brand is quite an achievement. And he said he emphasized on the vision that he had is basically help players around the world build their own sports club, and being like a club owner, and you get to be a scout, an owner, a coach, and an e-player. And then if you succeed well, you get amazing experiences. And he says that he hopes that a lot of things will evolve towards this objective on the platform this year.
Yeah, just a question from the chat. Can you go back to what the Netflix comparison was?
Yeah, so he said that their retention and engagement rate was less similar, like maybe a bit like lower than Netflix's, but like he made that as a good comparison and not a negative one.
Okay.
Like I think like I don't know the engagement rates and the retention rates of Netflix, but they have to be pretty high. And so if you have like similar rates than them, that's probably good.
Yep.
We talked about J-League. He said that active discussions were going on, that they want to do the deal, and it's not a money issue, but some conditions are not acceptable if they want to exploit the product the right way. He said that, and he said he cannot say more about that because of the ongoing conversation. About Ligue 1, because it's the last Big Five league that is not on the platform, while Sorare is a French company. And he said that it's basically the same thing. We want to do this, but some conversations take way longer than others. And they want to find deals that can benefit both parties. And sometimes it takes some time. And then...
Do you want to speculate on what those are? Like if it's not money, what?
For J-League, I don't know, but for Ligue 1, I would say that Ligue 1 right holders are kind of jackasses, and so that's my opinion on that. And also, I feel like they want to do the thing on their own. Like, so the Ligue 1 right holders, so the league has bought a very successful and popular fantasy game in France called MPG,
Yep.
which is a free game. And I feel like one of their moves is to actually like get some kind of competition with Sorare only on Ligue 1, but on their own. Numero 10 is saying that I'm spot on Ligue 1, so I might be right.
Yep.
And so the last question, questions are coming from the chat directly because we finished the questions that we had for Nicolas. And he said, so he was asked on like how they are attracting whales, and he said like they had a squad working on this. He talked about sponsored divisions. He said that's something they are studying, but didn't like specify other things. He talked about the great community events that they were in France, but also everywhere, and they were supporting those events. He said that there will be more events like the Zidane experiences. He said that we were months but not years away from TV commercials, and he said we're waiting to break down barriers and blockers we mentioned before doing TV commercials. He's not happy at all, and I'm not happy at all neither about the Opta K-League situation, and he's saying that he's doing their best to fix this. And basically our best to fix this is like shouting at Opta to do a better job. And okay, Vita, thank you for doing that. Vita says that sponsored divisions was mostly for free-to-play divisions. Maybe that's how you can actually like get money for the prize pool that you're actually distributing.
Yeah, because there are more people playing, so more
eyes.
Yeah.
He repeated that no new sports were coming to Sorare in 2023. He didn't exclude the possibility of having SO11 at some point in time, but it didn't say they were working on it, but like didn't exclude it from possibilities. Someone asked him about like could they avoid the drop in price that they could could they do anything about that? He says that they did what they did their best to actually try to fix the situation, but like a series of events happened and some of them are not of they can't have a control on that. They can have a control on inflation and stuff like that, basically. He said that you can expect club shop stuff dropping in a maximum of 3 weeks. And he said that a lot of things can happen to monetize also differently. He talked about like skins, like beautiful things to actually like apply to, I don't know, maybe your cards, or maybe he didn't specifically say about cards, but like skins, he said, and secondary market, and they're also studying more stuff to actually like monetize differently. And the last question was about ETH rewards on the NBA product, and he said that it's important that they want like ETH rewards on every sport that they bring, because they want to have like different rewards in their game, and they say that they work on it and they're confident it can happen soon. And that's it.
So you sat through the interview. You have listened to it twice already. Was there anything that you felt was left out? Or should I save that for office hours on Wednesday?
I mean, yeah, not really. I mean, you could argue that some things were left out, but it's a 1-hour interview. Sure. And you have to focus on stuff. And I feel like most questions were addressed. He talked at some point, I missed out in the summary, but he talked about loans not being in like the right situation right now. Like there were not enough like clear rules on loans. But like he tried to take questions from the chat directly. And I think like we cannot use Nicolas' time to actually talk about like loan rules, right? I mean, it's important to have someone at Sorare working on that, but I don't care if Nicolas is aware of the situation or not, right? And Nicolas has to bring a vision to the company, and the vision is everyone can become a sport owner, right? And I feel like they're doing their best to actually work in that direction, and they're obviously a very long way to go, and he kind of acknowledges that. And to me, the feeling I have is we're still very early in the product, and it's not too big to fail. Like it's that it's like I think like he understands what's going on, and he understands like what they have to do like to go further. But like it's not because it's a 4 billion company already that it has done everything that he expects the company to do. And I feel like there's a long way to go still. and that maybe like people overestimated like the company and the state of the company and the state of the product in 2022. And I think everyone realizes now that we're still very early and there's a lot of things to do. And like, if the fiat wallet happens, like let's say in 2023, I don't think it will happen in 2023, but I could be wrong. I mean, 2 years after the implementation of the fiat wallet, we'll probably be joking about the state of the product in 2022 or 2023, right? I mean, like, there are so many features that are left to be developed, and to make sure that the product is um, a mainstream product. And to me, the most like surprising thing is that he still thinks the product is complex and that there's too many info being displayed and stuff like that. And to me, it feels like, wow, if you think Sorare is complex, I mean, you don't want to get your nose inside SorareData because you won't get shit. I mean, like, wow. So no, so I mean, that's interesting to me.
Yeah, it is important to recognize that his role as CEO is not gameplay, and so
Yeah.
like there are questions that I think people probably would have wanted to hear his response on, and he wouldn't have one, and so there wouldn't even be much to say. Jumpshoot here is saying that there are Sorare TV ads on MLB Network here in the
Yeah.
States.
What are they? Are they like sponsor segments or like really like TV ads?
Yeah, they're TV ads.
Okay. Like, is there a tweet like with one of the TV ads? I would be very interested in seeing one.
I don't know. Somebody can find one.
If someone
Surely.
has one, yeah. I'd be very interested to see what the TV commercial look like.
Oh, it was Nellis with Juan Soto.
Oh, okay.
One of
So
those, I
they
guess.
reuse. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, why not? But I feel like MLB Network is like very specific, right?
Yeah. I think the
Yeah,
people who watch MLB Network would just be thrilled at seeing John Nellis try to play baseball. Quick one here from Clement about how Nicola and Alok are both saying, the plans are big multi-year plans. They're not things that we're trying to fix in 2 seconds. So
yeah. And one thing that is very important, I feel like, so to me, the decisions that they are making today should not be decisions driven by the market drop, right? So my first question when I think about like when someone tells me about something that they think should be implemented on Sora is, would you implement this during a bull market? Would you implement this during a stable market? Because I feel like if you're implementing stuff only based on the fact that your market dropped, I mean,
yeah,
it's if it does, if like it goes up again, is it going to work at that time? And are you going to have to actually like remove that rule? Because so I mean, that's why it's so important that they don't rush any kind of decisions. And also, I feel like you should not care about the community sentiment on the decisions that you are going to take. Because if you really think that the decision that you're going to take is a good decision and that is going to help market stability, you should not care about what the community and some members of the community are going to think about that. You have to be 100% convinced, though, that this is going to change for good. And that's, I mean, I wouldn't want to be any close to the shoes of the guy taking those decisions right now.
that's fair. That's fair. I'm going to stop us now because the more we talk will be what we are saying and not what Nicola's saying. And that was the point of this show. We will be back later the week, though, with office hours where we can then jump all over Nicola and say what we really think. So as we're not using his words. But thank you to everybody who joined the chat here live. Again, if you guys could hit the like button, really appreciate it. If you speak French and you want to listen or watch the original, there's a link in the description of this video to the Twitch stream, and you can check that out. And if anybody wants to either watch that or watch this one and do some great Twitter threads all about the interview, we're happy to have that done. So thank you, everyone. And Maxime and I will see you later this week for Office Hours.